Namaste and good afternoon, everyone. So I thought since it's before the valedictory session, it's the kind of concluding session, why not give you a little bit more sensory stimulation than just words and audio. So I'm not going to take up time thanking the wonderful team of organizers because all my friends earlier have said that. I'm just going to invoke the mother and offer all my gratitude to her because as SriAurobindo says, without her nothing can move. This seminar is also being organized because she is here. So as SriAurobindo says, lay all on her for she's the cause of it all. So it's she who has given the right inspiration, the right direction for this beautiful seminar to be organized. So all our gratitude to her. And whenever we speak of SriAurobindo, we cannot but speak of the mother as well. So as the mother said, without me, he is unmanifest. So to make him manifest, we have to invoke her. So when I was asked to come to this seminar, and the title was very simple, Educational Philosophy of SriAurobindo, and this happening in Baroda. And as has been said by many speakers in the morning sessions as well, Baroda was SriAurobindo's Karm Bhumi. And this morning I was very moved by one particular statement that Raj Mata said, that it was Baroda who gave SriAurobindo India. And then I kind of finished it like that in my mind, that it was Baroda also who gave India SriAurobindo. So what he was able to do here, whether it was in his literary work, his own self-culture, self-development, his work as an educator, his writings on education, which eventually evolved into what we today know as integral education. While he was in Baroda, the essays that he was writing on, the topics that he was taking up were around the theme of national education. Because this was also part of his work. He was concerned about the nation building. He was not only concerned about the freedom of the country, but what are we going to do with the freedom? People often think that that transformation happened after Alipur jail, but that actually happened. He was very cognizant, very aware, very conscious of why India needs freedom. And as part of his fourfold or rather fivefold program for India's independence, national education was an important aspect of that. So Swaraj, Swadeshi, boycott, national education, and passive resistance. And all of these things have been in different ways were taken later on by the later independence movement that happened after SriAurobindo went to Pondicherry. But this national education part somehow got dropped. And even while SriAurobindo was in the middle of freedom movement, there are essays and writings in Bande Mataram where his ideas on national education were being challenged by the moderates of the freedom movement. Because the argument was, why national education? What is unique about any nation that we need a national education? Human beings are human beings, human mind is human mind, human emotions are human emotions. So what is unique about why India should have a national education, or for that matter, US should have a national education, or Timbuktu should have a national education? So SriAurobindo has addressed those points also in a very detailed way. If we read his speeches that are not necessarily marked as on education, but there are very important references to it. So I thought I'll just latch on to this idea of national education. And what does he specifically mean by nation when he says national education? And since morning, a lot of references have been made as to how SriAurobindo's integral education philosophy has been the basis in some ways, or has been the instigator or the inspiration behind the national education policy. As I think Parmeshwaranji also hinted, it may have been a starting point, but there is a long way to go. But that's a discussion for some other time. So before we talk about what is nation in Sri Aurobindo's vision for national education, I want to make one point specifically to the students. You've all been listening so patiently and so wonderfully to all us, you know, people with big heads and with PhDs and whatnot. Don't believe anything until you come to your own conclusion that this is what I want to understand. So this is where I want to invoke one very important note of caution Sri Aurobindo gives in his very early writings, that our first necessity, if India is to survive and do her appointed work in the world, India has to be Vishwaguru. India is Vishwaguru. India was, India will be. But if India has to do the appointed work in the world, what is that first necessity is? That the youth of India should learn to think. We can do self-exploration, but our first necessity is to become good thinkers. Sri Aurobindo has also written a lot about what it means to think right. And in fact, one of the things he said in a letter to his brother, that India's problem is not that we don't have spirituality or we don't have dharma or this and that. Our problem is that we have forgotten how to think. And he used the phrase thought phobia. So youth of India should learn to think, and then he says to think independently. I've given the reference. I can share this with Amit ji or Shaurya ji. Find this reference online, read the whole essay, and find what examples he gives as to what it means to think independently on all subjects. Do not take my word for it, or Kiran ji's, or Parmeshwaran ji's, or Amit sir's, anybody's word. Think, read yourself. So even what I'm going to share as to what nation is, think about that yourself. So what is national education? Again, in a very early writing, Sri Aurobindo says national education is that which is proper to the Indian soul. Pay attention to the word soul, and I'll come to that as to why that is important, and need and temperament and culture. That we are in quest of, not necessarily that we have been, but that we are in quest of. But as has been said by many others, what we are in quest of, what the future that we are trying to create, has its basis in the past. So naturally the culture, the temperament, the Indian soul that we are in quest of has its roots in the past. But national education will be that will help us prepare to seek, to be in the quest of that. Not merely faithful to the past, but to the developing soul of India, to her future need, and to her eternal spirit. This is the crux. There is a developing soul, and yet there is an eternal spirit. This is fundamental to understanding Sri Aurobindo's integral education philosophy also, and as Jyoti Bendi was also saying in the morning, that this is one of the radical contributions Sri Aurobindo and the mother have made in the field of educational philosophy when they brought this idea of psychic education. Because psychic is the developing soul, and then there is the eternal spirit, the Atman, that is ajanma, that is timeless. But there is some projection of that evolves, that grows, that develops with all our experiences. And that is what I think Parmeshwaran ji was also trying to say, that in this self-exploration we have to touch that which is the developing soul. Now see, he was talking about in the case of an individual, and Sri Aurobindo is also talking about the same thing in the context of nation, because this is where his definition of nation becomes very interesting. But before we get to that, just a few fundamentals that Sri Aurobindo himself explained in response to the questions when the moderate leaders in the freedom movement were asking why national education, and he talked about that each culture, each civilization, each nation, each collective has somehow evolved a certain understanding of what a human being is. And unless our education is based on that understanding what a human individual is, how can it fulfill the need for nation building? So the few fundamentals that he pointed out, and there are many, but I'm just picking out few. One is that each and every one of us, all of us are learners, works in progress. We are souls in evolution. We are evolving, we are growing through all our mental, physical, vital, emotional experience. And education is the first conscious means that society, a collective, a nation provides to a small child to start working out that soul through the instruments of life, mind, and body. Life, mind, and our emotional, vital self, our physical self, and our mental self. True for the individual, true for the nation. And also that all growth happens from within. It has been pointed out in the very beginning. This morning also, nothing can be taught, everything evolves from within. But an additional point that is very unique to Indian way of thinking about learning, teaching is that of pacing. Each of us evolve at different stages. So there is a progression, there is a gradual progression. So when SriAurobindo says on the, in Synthesis of Yoga, the kal, the time aspect is also very important. Each one of us learns at our own pace. So these are the few fundamentals that SriAurobindo talked about in terms of what is unique about India's way of looking at human individual. And on this, our education should be based. And then he went on to talk about the 3 aims of education that build upon this very idea of national education. National education has to build the individual. National education also has to build the nation. But in what way? He says it very clearly, the work of national education has to be to preserve, strengthen, and enrich the nation's soul and its dharma. Just like you and I are souls in evolution, there is a nation soul in evolution. Our job as Indians, if we want to be truly Indians, we have to identify with that soul of India. And what is the national dharma? These are the things that education must facilitate, he said. But what is also true to India is, which is not often the case in several other civilizational views of life and reality, is that beyond individual, beyond nation is humanity. So the purpose of education should also be to raise both the individual and the nation so that it can work towards the upliftment of the humanity. So not a narrow chauvinistic idea of national education. This is one important thing. So coming to the main question, what is a nation? Often we think nation is our map, our national symbols, our geography, our states, our state capitals, how many languages we have, how many religions we have, the population. I mean, this is one question people, I just don't know. I never learn about population of a city or a country or this thing. People, how many people are in Pondicherry? How many people are in Aurobindo? I don't know. That's not, SriAurobindo is in Pondicherry. For me, it's the soul of the place that matters. So, what is a nation? Often, by nation, we look at the outer understanding of what nation is. Geography, people, and also maybe the state, the idea of nation state, the political system they have, the economic system they have, those kinds of things, the language they speak, the religions they may be practicing. But SriAurobindo makes it very clear, from an Indian perspective, our understanding of nation has to be much deeper. We are not satisfied with the surface level understanding. And as I said, if our understanding of human being, which I just described briefly, is that deep, naturally our understanding of what nation is, what Rashtra is, also has to be very deep. So just like the human individual in our ancient knowledge, and SriAurobindo refers to that, very simply we understand as 3 bodies. The Sukshma, the Sthul Sharira, or the gross body, the physical body of the being, the individual, the Sukshma Sharira, the subtle body of the individual, and then the Karan Sharira, the causal body. Exactly the same way we have to understand nation as well. So what is the gross body of ourselves? right? What we see very much on the outside. What will it mean in terms of the nation? It will mean the geography, the boundaries, right? The flag, the states, and also it will mean what is in Indian tradition is known as the Pranamaya Kosha. So that is the Annamaya Kosha, the matter, the geography, the boundaries, whether we call it the India that was given to us in 1947 or the India of SriAurobindo's vision, which is the Akhand Bharat, however we want to define it. That is the one part of the gross body of India. And then there is the Pranamaya Kosha, the life force of the nation, which is the people. And here I want to invoke one beautiful idea from Sri Aurobindo, where he said that how can you say you love your country when each and every part of your being, I'm not quoting him exactly, does not thrill at the touch of everything Indian or at the sight of everything Indian, whether it is the music, whether it is the food, whether it is language, whether it is the sound, whether it is anything. If your heart throbs at that, that's when you begin to love the Pranamaya Kosha, the life force of the nation. And having lived many years outside of India, it's been very much a part of my experience. The moment you hear somebody speaking, India, I may not know the language, but that Indianness was, waking up. So that is the gross body, still very much surface. So the Panchakosha system that we have in Indian tradition, that is used to understand nation also. That's the gross, the Sthul Sharira. Then we have the subtle body, the Sukshma Sharira, which in our tradition is also known as the Manomaya Kosha, the mind plane, which is where all the arts, the literature, the sciences, the beautiful creations that individually and collectively Indian mind has created. All that is part of the Sukshma Sharira of the nation. Do you feel love for all that? Do you feel that throb when you walk into a concert and all of a sudden maybe an American performer or someone starts singing some song of India? I had attended an A.R. Rahman concert in the US, and oh boy, the kind of thrill that was there in the audience. So everything, the arts, seeing an Indian painting somewhere in Australia, how do you feel about that? So that's when you start connecting with the Sukshma Sharira of the nation. And finally is the causal body, the Karan, the cause of it all, which is subtler than the Sukshma Sharira. It's even subtler because it can't even be seen. It doesn't even have products like art or sciences or literature or poetry. That is that inner temperament. Can we connect with that temperament that has been there in the Indian collective psyche, rooted for ages and ages? If we can identify that, we can get closer to the soul of India. So that's the peculiar temperament. But Sri Aurobindo is not even satisfied with that. Because Indian thought is not satisfied with that. The Indian thought goes beyond. Remember that I said individual, nation, humanity, the aims of education. This is where that third aim of humanity comes in. Within these three bodies of the mother, that mother which is the nation, that's another important aspect of, how do we say we are Indians? Do we identify this Bhumi as mother or as just India? Like that. So these, he says, are the three bodies of the mother. But within these three bodies of the gross, subtle and causal is something that is the source of it all. And that source is common, which is the eternal spirit, the eternal source. So there is the developing soul and the eternal spirit, which Jyoti Ben beautifully described in the morning when somebody had asked the question, Atma ek hai ya bahut sari hai? This question was also asked by the mother when she had said, there is only one soul in India, right? I mean, she narrates that story when somebody asked that. So that one source within all three bodies of the Mother India, which is a common source, not just for India, but also for France and Greece and Italy and US and Iraq and Ukraine and Russia and all the other countries. Because each of them is a unique manifestation of that one common source. This is the way Indian thought and Sri Aurobindo's thought defines nation, and this is what he said national education should help us get in touch with that. So just to kind of reiterate or revise, we are all teachers here, so revision is important. When we speak of a nation, we mean a separate culture and civilization. We mean a peculiar national temperament which has become too deeply rooted to be altered, Macaulay or no Macaulay. As I think our governor sir was saying, we did not become theirs as much as we became afterwards, after the Britishers left. That's a sad story because we forgot the national education part of it. We just, did khichdi with Swadeshi and Swaraj, but that's a whole other story. It has that peculiar temperament that has become too deeply rooted to be altered. Macaulays may come and go, India will continue. India lives in eternity. This is not just Sri Aurobindo, but every Rishi, Maharishi, Yogi who has walked on this land has said this. So let's not even give credit so much to, it's been 75 years, we are in 76th year. Let's not talk about what they were able to do. Let's talk about what we have not been able to do. And that's where I think NEP gives very good hope. And in all these, we discover a manifestation of God in national life. So just like there is a manifestation of God in individual life, exactly like that, there is divine, there is divinity in collective life. Let us not tamper with it. So if we have this perspective, if we have this understanding, we will think 1,000 times before even thinking about the idea of burning national flag or not standing up for national anthem. Not because that's not cool or those kinds of things, but because all these are outer expressions of that divinity in national life. Can our education help us connect with that? That is the challenge for national education. I think this part has already been covered beautifully by Parmeshwaranji, because Indian temperament, if we have to go to what is that peculiar Indian temperament, it is spiritual, intuitive and psychic. I'm not going to go into detail on that, just that this picture is from Gujarat, if you can recognize. But, Adilaj, yes. But, yes, our temperament peculiarly has been spiritual, intuitive and psychic, yet we have never ignored the outer life. So our foundation of spirituality was always based on a very rich, vital, intellectual activity. Britishers did not come to loot our spiritual wealth, they came to loot our material wealth. So we were also pretty materially rich. We also had great sources of knowledge, as I think was discussed in the morning also. So our spirituality, right from the Vedic time, was always life-affirming. For some part of our history, we forgot that. But course correction has been done, thanks to Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. So the challenge would be then how to make our education Indian, national in this context. Just by incorporating study of Vedas or Gita or Upanishads or Kalidas or other texts is not going to do the job. We have to get to the root. We have to understand what was it that made India so intellectually great, which Macaulay got worried about. So that part, Sri Aurobindo said, for that we have to look at what was the psychological basis for that Aryan success. we have to develop that Aryan spirit. So the homework, especially for the, I mean, even though we are all students, but especially those who carry the tag of students at this point in their life's journey, find out how Sri Aurobindo defines what is Aryan. We have to give you homework. This seminar would not be effective if there is no homework. So what is the Aryan spirit that Sri Aurobindo speaks about? And that success of the Aryan spirit, he said, was based in the profound knowledge of human psychology, as Parmeshwaranji was also describing. And there are few essays that I will highly recommend. I don't think anybody talked about those, were the essays that were written in Bengal in response to someone's writing, which were titled The Brain of India. And there is one sentence, it's a 4 or 5 part essay. Read the whole thing. But there is one sentence that I'm just going to share and conclude with, that is, what developed the brain of India were two things. The practice of brahmacharya, homework number 2. What truly is brahmacharya? Sri Aurobindo has given answers to that. There are no questions that have not been answered. And sattvic development. And Jyoti Ben already pointed us in that direction as to what is the role of education. He spoke in beautiful crisp Hindi. Tamas ka visarjan, rajas ka niyantran, control of rajas, and sattva ka udbodhan, the uplifting of the sattva. Brahmacharya and sattvic development, Sri Aurobindo said, develop the brain of India. Before we think about psyching, if you have to think independently, ask yourself, how developed is your brain? It's these psychological principles that he's talking about. What is brahmacharya? What is the development of sattva? And the brain of India was perfected by yoga. So this is the role of our education. I think we can conclude with that. I had few more things, but can I go? Okay, I think we can, some of these points have already been covered. I will just end with this, that all that I was saying comes to this conclusion, that national education, Sri Aurobindo said this, he was very frank in his writing. He said, he is no friend of India who says, forget about India's past. India's friend is one who says, discover your past, work with the present, and build towards the future. So national education will be that which will harmonize the past and the future. And then he also says, our goal is not to bring the Gurukulas of the past and start teaching the way, Brahmagupta was teaching mathematics, or all those kinds of, or Aryabhatiya was teaching mathematics. We have to take all the modern advancements that have happened in curriculum design, in pedagogy, in the field of education, east, west, north, south. We have to find a way to integrate them. But the core, the soul has to be, are we connecting it with the soul of the nation? Is our education helping preserve and propagate the dharma of the nation? If that is not the case, then no matter how many Gurukulas we establish, we are still going to create a division between Gurukul education and the CBSE and the UGC and the ICSE requirements and all that. And that is where I think Mother's experiment in integral education, which Jyoti Ben so beautifully described in the morning at ashram, as well as experiments that are done in Delhi ashram or in Auroville, play an important role. They are the modern Gurukulas, where people speak not just Sanskrit but English and French and dress in a very cool way, right? Are familiar with all that is modern life has to offer, but yet the goal is to stay connected with the root. So outer doesn't matter, it's the inner that counts. So with that, I conclude and I thank everyone for your patient listening. And let's again just for 30 seconds, if we can maintain silence, and in that silence offer all the deliberations that have happened since morning at the feet of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo, and then we can open for questions. So just 30 seconds of silent concentration. Let this be an offering, yeah? Thank you.
We can